It is in the depths of the heart that one decides who to become. Seeds of hope and love, or fear and hatred, often find their way into the soil of a person's heart, and quickens their gait toward either a vision of unending light or toward a deceptively poisonous darkness. A young seminarian with a pure and fertile heart sat in a classroom in Smolensk Seminary in 1853 and listened to stories about the gospel of Christ being preached in far-off China. These accounts inspired within him a dazzling vision of his own future as a missionary, an entrance into the luminous darkness of the unknown, the unanticipated, the uncomfortable. An Abrahamic journey that would take him 6,000 miles eastward to Japan. Born Ivan Dmitrievich Kazatkin in 1836 in a village near Smolensk, Russia, the future Nicolas, saint and enlightener of Japan, showed much promise as a young seminarian, and upon completion of his studies in Smolensk, he earned a scholarship to the St. Petersburg Theological Academy. He excelled there too, and earned the respect of the authorities of the academy, who thereafter encouraged him to pursue a life of scholarship and teaching. But, to the rector's dismay, instead of heeding this advice, Ivan chose to follow his heart's deepest yearning after he saw a posting for a replacement priest at the Russian consulate in Japan. "I have a strong resolution in my heart to preach Christianity and enlighten the foreign people," Ivan remarked. "Going to Japan is the best chance to accomplish my desire." Ivan took the name Nicolas, or Nikolai in Russian, upon being tonsured a monk on June 22, 1860, and was ordained to the diaconate and priesthood within the same year. While tonsuring him, Bishop Nektari encouraged him in his missionary calling. "It is not in a monastery that you will spend your devotional life, but having left your homeland, you will have to serve our Lord in a far-off and pagan land. You must take the cross of a zealot, the staff of a pilgrim. You are called not only to be a monk, but to be an apostle as well." The bishop's words were prophetic, as Father Nikolai's calling would not be limited to the parochial duties of a diplomatic chaplain, but rather would overflow far beyond the monastery and consulate and into the hearts and minds of the Japanese people. Father Nikolai traveled 6,000 miles by horse and carriage, crossing the Urals, eastward through Siberia to Irkutsk, before crossing the Baikal Lake by ferry, where he was forced to winter in Nikolaevsk. His delay seemed to be the work of providence, as it brought him face to face with one of the Orthodox Church's most renowned missionaries, Saint Innocent of Alaska, who was also constrained in his travel by the poor weather conditions. In Saint Innocent, Father Nikolai found a kindred spirit whose heart also burned with the desire to spread the gospel beyond the horizon of his familiar homeland. Saint Innocent encouraged Father Nikolai and gave him advice from his 40 years of missionary experience. His first task, said Saint Innocent, was to learn the language of the people. Saint Innocent also warned Father Nikolai the importance of enduring through the darkness of loneliness and despair that often accompanies missionaries. He also outfitted him with a new clerical cassock and cross in order to gain the respect and trust of the Japanese people. Arriving to Hakodate like a frail and naked seed on a sun-scorched summer day in 1861, St. Nicholas faced the fierce xenophobia of the Tokugawa shogunate, the last feudal military government in Japan that saw any foreign missionary presence as a threat to its sovereignty and ancient heritage. Father Nikolai attempted to take his mentor's advice in cultivating the soil of his missionary field by learning the language of the people, but he found it nearly impossible to learn Japanese and converse with the local people, and soon he teetered on the brink of abandoning his calling. He even began reverting back to his academic interests. But just as an unexpected shower of rain brings renewed hope of harvest to an arid land, So too did Father Nikolai's second providential encounter with St. Innocent of Alaska. The Blessed Hierarch was rerouted through Japan, en route to Kamchatka, and thus had the opportunity to see his beloved protégé and breathe new life into his efforts. Through this meeting, Father Nikolai received a renewed vigor and zeal, launching him into 7 years of intense study of the language, culture, religion, and customs of the Japanese people. Father Nikolai even sat at the feet of the teachers of Confucianism, Shintoism, and Buddhism, and listened to the sermons of Buddhist preachers and storytellers in his attempt to make the unknown familiar. After years of cultivation with seemingly no fruit in sight, Father Nikolai one day was visited at the consulate by what seemed to be a harbinger of pestilence and drought to the work that had been done, but was in fact the first fruits of his arduous labors. A samurai Shinto priest and an aggressively xenophobic and hostile nationalist, Sawabe Takuma, who frequented the consulate in order to give fencing lessons to an officer, confronted Father Nikolai about his intentions in Japan. After a tense exchange, Sawabe was struck by the humble priest's calm demeanor and reasonable responses to his accusations and questions. Slowly, he began to open up to the missionary and visited him more often. Eventually, this man, who might very well have come to kill the priest, became his first convert to the faith and was ordained as an Orthodox priest. Sawabe, given the baptismal name Paul, risked his life numerous times to bring others to the faith. Because missionary activities were banned by the government and converts could be executed, the growth of the Orthodox Church simultaneously brought a period of persecution. But Nikolai saw this as a further catalyst to the flourishing of the Church in Japan. These persecutions have served, he reflected, with the help of God's grace, to make it so that those who had the faith only in their mind now had it in their heart. The enemies of Christ did not have the satisfaction of hearing even from women or children a single word of weakness or fear in professing Christ. Japan continued to persecute Christians until 1873, when it finally overturned its xenophobic edicts and opened its doors to the outside world. Throughout his missionary career, Father Nikolai focused on the formation of the local leadership of the Church and on translating scriptural, liturgical, and theological texts into Japanese. By 1878, more than 4,100 believers had joined the Church, largely through the instruction and catechesis of indigenous leaders. Father Nikolai requested that a bishop be sent from Russia. After being summoned back to the homeland by the Synod, he was consecrated bishop on March 30th, 1880, in response to his own entreaty. The fruit from the flowering tree of orthodoxy in Japan, which began as a small seed of hope sown in the heart of a young, idealistic seminarian at Smolensk Seminary almost 50 years earlier, was now ripe for harvest. Yet the laborers were still few. If the number of preachers here correspond to the mission's spiritual needs, Nicolas remarked in a letter to a friend, there would be Orthodox Christians in all the cities and villages of the provinces of Japan. All of Japan is ready to adopt Christianity, and only men are needed to gather the harvest in the field of God. The missionaries' plea for assistance to the Holy Synod of Russia fell on deaf ears as the Russo-Japanese War broke out on February 10, 1909. Despite limited resources, Father Nikolai is remembered as a model Orthodox missionary for fully immersing himself in the culture of the people he wanted to convert, and by allowing them to assist him in sharing the faith with others. Within 50 years after his first arrival, the Church of Japan numbered 266 communities, with over 33,000 Orthodox Christians, 1 archbishop, 1 bishop, 35 priests, 6 deacons, 14 teachers of singing, and 116 catechists. Father Nikolai reposed in peace on February 3, 1912, and is still remembered fondly by the Japanese people. To this day, the Holy Resurrection Cathedral, built by Saint Nikolai himself in the ancient Byzantine style, stands perched on a hill overlooking the city of Tokyo, like a tree, providing shade and nourishment to those around it. Passers-by are reminded that Nikolai-do, or Nikolai's house, as the locals call it, is awaiting them with open arms. May a seed from this tree of Christ's universal love fall into our hearts, and through the prayers of our Father among the saints Nikolai, enlightener of Japan, may we too cultivate a desire to preach the good news of Jesus Christ to anyone who has ears to hear.